The sea stretched endlessly, a body of trembling silver and shadow, restless beneath the shifting sky. Waves rose and fell like the slow breathing of a giant, their sighs echoing through the stillness of creation's aftermath. The air was heavy with salt, fragrant and intoxicating, as if each gust of wind carried both promise and memory. Above, the heavens loomed in vast silence, a dome of pale light where stars still quivered, remnants of the great turmoil that had torn the cosmos into being. There was no land yet to tame the horizon, no firm boundary to restrain the conversation of water and sky. They met in a seamless embrace, endless and eternal. Blue folding into blue, light melting into shadow, desire flowing into silence. The sea's surface was alive with subtle movement, as though it bore a secret too great to contain. Beneath its surface, the currents tangled, curling into each other, swirling with an urgency that spoke of birth, of beginnings, of something inevitable. Creation itself was still raw. The scars of conflict lingered in the air, the severed bonds of the old gods, the trembling memory of Kronos' strike, the breaking apart of what had once been whole. Yet from that wound, from that act of severing, the world pulsed with anticipation. Where chaos had been torn, beauty sought to enter. Where destruction had ruled, harmony lingered like a fragrance that would not fade. The sea carried this memory, rolling it endlessly within its depths, waiting for the moment when silence would give way to song. The waves swelled with a rhythm deeper than time, a rhythm both soothing and erotic, as though the waters themselves longed for release. They caressed one another, crest against crest, foam dissolving into foam, sighing against the unseen shore of eternity. Their touch was tender and endless, a dance of fluid bodies surrendering to each other. Each wave collapsed into another, shivering with delight, as though the ocean itself were caught in some ecstatic anticipation. The wind moved lightly across the surface, teasing the water into ripples that caught the faint light and shattered it into trembling fragments. It was a play of texture, of sensation, smooth swells breaking into froth, froth dissolving back into smoothness. The sky, heavy with soft clouds, bent low to kiss the surface of the waves, and in that touch there was intimacy, a secret yearning. The air smelled of salt and sweetness, as if the sea exhaled desire. Time in this beginning was not measured by hours or days. It flowed like the tide, endless, circular, folding upon itself. Night and day were not yet divided. The heavens carried both stars and the blush of dawn, as though refusing to choose between them. A half-light lingered, mystical and tender, neither bright nor dark, but an eternal twilight that carried with it the mood of expectation. It was in this soft glow that the sea began to change. Foam rose where the waters trembled most violently, frothing into a whiteness more radiant than snow. It gathered slowly at first, shy and hesitant, then with growing urgency, like a secret swelling into confession. The foam shimmered, touched by light that seemed not to belong to sun nor moon, but to something more intimate, something born of desire itself. The air around it thickened, heavy, luminous, as though creation held its breath. Every ripple, every gust of wind, every sigh of the sea seemed to lean toward that growing foam, as though all existence bent in service to it. The ocean, vast and eternal, surrendered its endless rhythms to the swelling whiteness, carrying it gently, tenderly, as one carries a lover. The heavens, too, leaned low, their vast silence folding into that single point of trembling radiance. All of creation seemed to pause in reverence. And still, there was no figure, no form, only the promise, the certainty that from this union of water and sky, of wound and healing, of chaos and order, something divine would arise. The foam quivered like lips longing to part, trembling with the sweetness of anticipation. The sea surged harder, pressing against itself as though in labor. The currents tangled deeper, exhaling sighs from the abyss, carrying upward what had been hidden. This was no ordinary birth. It was not of blood nor of womb, but of longing, of severance transformed into beauty. The cosmos had known violence, had known the sharpness of blades, the tearing apart of father and son. Yet here, in the soft curve of waves and the tender caress of foam, that violence was transmuted. The wound became womb, the sea became sanctuary. Desire became the midwife of divinity. The silence grew profound. Even the wind seemed to hush, its teasing touch suspended as though unwilling to interrupt. The stars dimmed, the half-light deepened, and all the universe bent toward the ocean's trembling surface. It was a silence not of emptiness, but of awe, the kind of silence that fills the heart before a kiss, before the first touch, before the long-awaited unveiling. The sea, restless and alive, carried this silence like a secret lover. It moaned softly as its waves folded upon themselves, their rhythm slowing, deepening as though preparing for consummation. Foam rose higher, spreading wider. A bed of whiteness spread lovingly across the trembling water. Light clung to it, shimmered within it, until it was no longer foam but a veil, a luminous curtain behind which mystery gathered. Expectation thickened. The air was heavy. The waters shivered. The heavens quaked with anticipation. All creation held its breath. Something divine was about to cross the threshold. The wound of the old gods had not only torn the cosmos, it had prepared it, had carved a hollow into which beauty would pour itself. From the violence of Kronos' blade came not only blood, but possibility. From severance came union. From loss came birth. The sea remembered. It had swallowed the remnants of the severed, carried them into its secret depths, cradled them like treasures too sacred for mortal eyes. It had rocked them in its currents, whispered to them in its tides,
wrapped them in the intimacy of silence. And now, at last, it was ready to release what it had hidden. The foam trembled violently now, shivering with light, its whiteness luminous, aching, alive. The sky lowered further, pressing its breath against the sea, while the sea surged upward, aching for release. The two lovers, water and air, embraced with urgency, their kiss giving birth to radiance. The horizon dissolved into whiteness, and within that whiteness something stirred. The waves rose higher, their crests breaking with feverish intensity, throwing themselves against the foam, surrendering to it, adoring it. The ocean trembled, as though in ecstasy, as though every drop of water knew what was coming and longed for it. The air grew fragrant, unbearably sweet, as though flowers unseen had bloomed beneath the waves. The foam swelled one final time, trembling, luminous, unstoppable. The sea roared, the heavens quaked, and in that moment all creation seemed to lean forward, waiting, longing, aching. What had been hidden for so long was ready to emerge. And though her form had not yet broken through, though her figure had not yet graced the horizon, the promise of her presence was already enough to intoxicate the cosmos. Desire had gathered itself into foam, beauty into radiance, love into inevitability. The moment lingered, stretched, endless, as though the universe itself wished to savor anticipation. Something divine was about to be born. From the trembling veil of foam she arose, not as a sudden apparition, but as a slow unveiling, as though the sea itself longed to savor her emergence. The whiteness parted, rippling outward like silk unraveling, and in its heart a figure stirred. She was not merely born, she was revealed, as though she had always been present in the whispers of the tide, in the sigh of the wind, in the light that shivered upon the waves. Her first breath was not heard, yet it moved through the cosmos like a secret song. The waters bent to her, folding in reverence, their once restless rhythm now calmed, softened, subdued. Foam clung lovingly to her skin, dissolving into drops that slid down her body as though reluctant to let her go. Light gathered upon her, shimmering not from without, but from within, as though her presence itself was illumination. To describe her beauty was impossible, for it was not confined to face or form. She was beauty as essence, as aura, as irresistible current. Looking upon her was to feel one's own heart tremble, to sense the unraveling of walls, the surrender of will. She was the taste of salt upon lips, the warmth of skin touched by sun, the shiver of wind across bare shoulders. She was not beauty you saw, but beauty that entered you, filled you, remade you. The sea quivered with delight, its endless body surging upward to meet her. It had carried her, cradled her, concealed her secret, and now it rejoiced in her unveiling. Waves rose like arms reaching, froth spilled like offerings, and every drop of water glowed with her reflection. The ocean had birthed countless things, but none like this. This was not creature nor goddess alone, but desire given flesh, harmony given breath. The wind, ever playful and restless, hushed in awe. It circled her with tender restraint.
brushing softly against her hair, lifting strands like threads of gold that glimmered in the eternal twilight. The air grew fragrant, sweeter than blossoms, richer than honey, as though the wind had become perfume to honor her. With each exhale, the sky seemed to sigh, surrendering its vast silence to her presence.
Above, the sun bent low. It was no longer a distant watcher, but a worshipper, casting beams that kissed her skin with warmth. The light did not expose her, it adored her, wrapping her in radiance, as though even the heavens had fallen into her spell. And the stars, faint though they still lingered, quivered like jealous sparks, diminished yet unable to turn away. From the depths of the sea to the heights of Olympus, the gods felt her arrival. They did not need sight to know her. Her presence coursed through existence like a pulse, reaching them in waves of longing. Zeus, enthroned in the vault of the sky, felt his chest tighten with hunger he could not name. Poseidon, lord of the ocean's abyss, trembled as though his dominion had slipped from his grasp, for the sea no longer belonged to him, but to her. Even Hades, deep within the underworld, felt his shadowed halls stir with a sweetness that unsettled the gloom. None spoke, none dared, for she was not one to be claimed, not one to be named by others. She named herself through presence, through the way every heart bent toward her, every gaze surrendered to her. She was not passive in her unveiling. She commanded it, shaped it, as if even the act of her birth was an expression of will. The ocean did not simply deliver her, it obeyed her. The wind did not merely play, it worshipped. The light did not reveal, it adored. Her eyes opened, and with it the cosmos changed. Eyes that were not of color, but of depth, endless as the sea itself, looked upon the world with a tenderness so piercing that even the waves moaned. When her gaze touched the horizon, the air trembled with longing. When it lingered upon the heavens, the stars flared and then dimmed in shame, unable to rival her brilliance. When it fell upon the sea, the waters shivered, their endless dance now a song composed for her. She stepped forward, for there was no land yet, but on to the foam itself, which rose firm beneath her, as if transformed into marble beneath her weight. Each step was a ripple through creation, a chord strum on the strings of existence. Flowers unseen bloomed in hidden places. Hearts of gods and mortals yet unborn quickened in anticipation. Desire itself, until now scattered and unshaped, crystallized into her, into this radiant being whose presence rewrote the laws of longing. She lifted her arms, and with that gesture the sky blushed. A flush of rose spread across the heavens, delicate and trembling, as though dawn itself had been born from her. The sea answered with a sigh, so deep it shook its depths, and foam leapt to kiss her ankles, unwilling to let her rise too far from its embrace. Every element leaned toward her, intoxicated, submissive. And she knew. She knew from the first moment that she was not a child of silence, but a mistress of hearts. She was not subject to the world's laws, but their author, for already the sea obeyed her rhythm. The sky reflected her glow, and the gods bent toward her like moths to flame. She had not only been born, she had arrived with dominion. The gods watched still, their hunger unspoken, their awe unmasked. For even power trembled before beauty, and even strength bowed before desire. Aphrodite had not asked for reverence, yet it surrounded her like a crown. She had not demanded worship, yet every element, every god, every whisper of the cosmos gave it freely. And the sea, her cradle, her lover, her first witness, roared with joy. Its waves danced higher, foaming and spilling, as though exalting her with endless applause. The wind carried the sound upward, scattering it across the heavens, so that every corner of creation knew her name before it was spoken. She smiled, and with that smile, the cosmos softened. The harsh scars of chaos faded, the bitterness of severance eased, and where there had been silence, there was now song. It was not a song sung aloud, but a song felt in the heart, a melody of warmth, tenderness, and aching desire. It was the song of Aphrodite, the hymn of her being, the promise that beauty and love were not fleeting, but eternal. Thus she stood, luminous and unyielding, her presence shaping the world before words, before temples, before prayers. She was not merely born from the sea, she was the sea's confession, its longing made flesh. She was not simply revealed by the foam, she was the foam's purpose, the secret it had always carried. And the gods, the winds, the waters, the stars, all knew at once nothing would ever be untouched by her. She was Aphrodite.
The sea still shivered with delight, waves rising and collapsing in endless praise. But beneath the ecstasy there stirred unease. Her presence was too radiant, too overwhelming to pass as a gentle gift alone. Beauty so profound could not exist without consequence, for every heart that touched it would be pierced, every will tested, every bond threatened. The cosmos trembled with the sweetness of her unveiling, yet within that sweetness was a seed of fear. The gods felt it first. Their thrones, once certain, seemed fragile as her aura spilled across the heavens. Zeus, whose lightning commanded obedience, felt within his chest a stirring unlike rage or triumph, but hunger. It was a hunger he could not name, only feel, an ache that softened his grip upon his scepter. He who had torn order from chaos now felt himself unmade by a single glance. Desire pulsed through him like fire, not strengthening, but unraveling. Poseidon, deep within the sea that had cradled her, rose in restless tides. The ocean, once his loyal dominion, no longer answered solely to his will. It bent to her, adored her, trembled at her touch. A jealousy as vast as the abyss swelled within him. He longed to claim her, to draw her into the depths, to fold her into his embrace as though she were his possession. But even as the desire grew, he knew she was not his, nor could she ever be. She was not of the sea. She was the sea's longing given flesh, and no lord could command that. Even Hades, cloaked in shadows, felt the disturbance ripple through his kingdom. The underworld, untouched by sun and sea, shivered as her radiance spilled into its corridors. For the first time, gloom itself yearned for light. Desire seeped into the cracks of his halls, blooming like forbidden blossoms in the dark. And though Hades rarely coveted what belonged to the upper world, even he felt his resolve weaken, his heart aching with a longing he had never known. Desire was awakening, and it spread like fire. It reached into the roots of mountains, into the veins of rivers, into the sighs of the wind. Every element bent toward her, intoxicated, entranced. But desire, though tender, is never without danger. For in longing lies rivalry, and in beauty lies the seed of envy.
The gods looked upon one another, each seeing in the other's eyes the same hunger, the same trembling need. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, three brothers whose strength had divided the cosmos, now found themselves bound by a shared vulnerability. Their power, their dominion, their thrones seemed diminished in her presence. Each imagined her at his side. Each longed to claim her smile, her touch, her radiance. And in those imaginings, conflict stirred. The heavens quaked with their silent rivalry. Lightning flickered at the horizon, waves crashed with sudden violence, the earth rumbled in quiet protest. Creation itself felt the tremor of gods undone by longing. For desire is not gentle when shared. It sharpens into envy, into fear, into the restless drive to possess. And yet Aphrodite did not waver. She did not recoil from their longing, nor shrink from their rivalry. Instead, she stepped upon the foam as though the world beneath her feet existed only to carry her forward. Her presence was not weakened by their hunger. It was strengthened, for desire was her domain, her language, her breath. Each gaze bent toward her only deepened her radiance, as though their longing fed her. The sea moaned louder, its waves colliding with violence now, no longer caresses, but tempests. Foam surged, winds howled, the horizon shivered, for even the elements were not immune to her spell. The ocean raged with love, the wind with longing, the sun with adoration, each striving to touch her more fully, to claim her presence as its own. Harmony trembled, torn between ecstasy and destruction. Mortals yet unborn stirred in the seed of time, their destinies already shaped by her. For the pulse of desire that swept across creation would be carried into their hearts as well. They would love, they would ache, they would fight and surrender, build and destroy, all in her shadow. Even before their birth, they were marked by her presence, woven into the tapestry of longing she had become. But it was among the gods that the first conflict swelled.
Zeus, restless upon his throne, clenched his hand around the lightning that had once secured his dominion. It flickered now, unsteady, its power diluted by the ache that consumed him. He thought of reaching for her, of pulling her into his embrace, of binding her to Olympus as his queen. But even in thought, he knew the folly. Aphrodite was not one to be bound. To possess her was to invite ruin, for she could no more be caged than the sea foam or the rising dawn.
Poseidon raged against his waters, sending storms across the horizon, waves crashing against themselves in fury. Yet no matter how violently he moved them, the sea bent still toward her, adored her, obeyed her. His jealousy burned, for he, Lord of the Abyss, had never been denied by his own domain. And yet here was she, effortless, sovereign, claimed not by rule, but by presence. His longing twisted into rage, for he sensed already that desire could unmake him. Hades, though silent, was no less shaken. He who rarely contended with his brothers now felt himself drawn into the same fever. His halls grew restless, the shades whispering of light, of warmth, of beauty. For the first time, shadows longed for radiance, and their master longed with them. Yet he kept his silence, his desire smoldering in the dark, dangerous precisely because it was unspoken. Thus the world trembled, not with war, but with the inevitability of it. For where desire is shared, rivalry grows, and where rivalry grows, conflict follows. And yet, the danger was not only in the gods' hearts, but in the very fabric of creation. The ocean's rage spilled into storms, the wind's hunger into gales, the sky's trembling into lightning. The world, still fragile from birth, now quivered with longing so intense it threatened to tear it apart. Aphrodite, radiant upon the foam, smiled. She was no stranger to this chaos. It was her element, her inheritance. For beauty that awakens desire cannot remain harmless, and she did not wish it to. She had come not only to soothe, but to stir. Not only to heal, but to hunger. Her presence was both balm and blade, both nectar and poison. In her gaze, the gods found themselves undone. Yet it was in that undoing that her power bloomed. Desire is sweet, but it is also peril. It builds temples and burns them. It binds lovers and severs them. It inspires music and silences it. Aphrodite was all of this, and as she rose upon the foam, her aura spread across the cosmos like fire, both tender and consuming. The sea roared, the sky thundered, the gods trembled, and still she smiled, for she knew the danger of desire was not weakness, but her dominion. Through their longing, she would rule. Through their rivalry, she would reign. And in that trembling moment, all creation understood. Beauty had not only been born, power had been born too.
The sea surged upward as though desperate to touch her again, waves leaping and collapsing at her ankles like adoring worshippers.
Foam clung to her calves, luminous and trembling, unwilling to release her, while the tide pressed close, caressing her with each eager swell. The ocean, vast and endless, became intimate, tender, almost shy in its adoration, as if afraid to bruise what it craved most. Her first step fell upon the foam, and the world shivered. It was not movement alone, but revelation. The ground of creation itself seemed to change beneath her touch. From the white froth of the sea burst sudden color. Blossoms unfurled in impossible haste, scattering their perfume into the salted air. Flowers born from longing itself bloomed to greet her, as though earth, though still half-formed, could not resist responding to her arrival. Her second step sent ripples through the horizon. The sea groaned low and deep, its depths convulsing with ecstasy. Fish turned upward, dazzled, their silver scales trembling in the glow that poured from her. The waves rose high, cresting with fever, not in rage but in joy, as though the entire body of water had fallen in love with her at once. She lifted her gaze, and with that simple motion the heavens blushed. The sky, pale and trembling, flushed with shades of rose and gold, as though dawn had spilled across it in sudden surrender. Clouds melted into softness, their edges glowing, and the stars, stubborn in their lingering, flared one last time before vanishing into her radiance. The light of the sun itself faltered, not in defeat, but in adoration, as though it had found its queen and bent willingly to her glow. The air grew heavy, sweet, thick with her presence. It carried her fragrance, not of flowers nor spice, but of something older, more intimate. The warmth of skin kissed by salt, the sweetness of breath just before a sigh, the faint ache of longing that clings to the chest after a lover's touch. The wind became her herald, rushing through the heavens to scatter her essence across creation. Every inhalation was worship, every exhalation surrender. And still she walked, foam firm beneath her feet, as though the sea itself wished to transform into marble to hold her steady. Each movement was a poem written in motion, each gesture a seduction that needed no words. Her arms, her hair, her lips, they did not merely exist, they spoke in silence, weaving spells that bound everything that witnessed her.
The gods trembled, undone by her. Zeus, master of thunder, felt his breath shorten, his grip loosen. Poseidon, lord of waters, clenched his trident, yet found no command left in him. The sea no longer obeyed him, but her. Even Hades, silent and veiled in darkness, felt his underworld stir as though craving her touch, shadows aching for light. None of them moved, for movement would have broken the spell, and none dared risk it. Mortals yet unborn stirred in the womb of time. Within their future hearts, the first seeds of longing were sown, the hunger for touch, the ache for beauty, the fire of desire. Lovers who would someday meet in secret gardens, who would tremble in each other's arms, who would destroy and rebuild empires for passion. All of them, across centuries unborn, were already hers. She was their pulse before they drew their first breath. She turned her gaze again, and the sea erupted. Waves shattered in foam, not from storm, but from joy, exploding into blossoms of white that leapt high into the air. The spray clung to her hair, jeweled droplets that slid like tears of devotion down her shoulders. Each drop shimmered in the light before dissolving against her skin, as if the sea itself had chosen to vanish rather than live apart from her. Her smile broke, and the world fell to its knees. It was no ordinary smile. It was the curve of lips that held every promise of ecstasy and every threat of ruin. It was sweetness that intoxicated and sharpened into hunger, tenderness that softened only to deepen into ache. In that single smile, the gods found themselves undone, the winds silenced, the sea enslaved. It was unbearable in its beauty, exquisite in its cruelty. Desire was no longer a quiet stirring. It was fire. It leapt through creation like flame through dry fields, igniting everything it touched. The sea burned with it, waves crashing not in rage, but in fever. The heavens burned, their light trembling with an ache they could not contain. The gods burned, their hearts clashing with both hunger and dread, for they understood at last she was not a gift, but a power that would test them, consume them, remake them. Still she walked, foam blossoming into flowers with each step, the horizon melting into color, the air heavy with her fragrance. Birds newly born of air and wing burst upward from the sea as though summoned, their cries sharp and trembling, filling the sky with music. Even their song was bent to her, high and piercing, woven into the rhythm of her unveiling.
She reached her arms outward, and the world answered. The sea rose higher, curling into shapes that bowed before her. The heavens spilled light, soft and blushing, as though the very dome of the sky had lowered in worship. The earth, though still unformed, trembled with anticipation, eager to cradle her steps. And then, silence. A silence that was not empty, but swollen, bursting with the sweetness of fulfillment. The waves stilled, the wind hushed, the heavens ceased their trembling. All of creation froze in adoration, as though afraid to breathe, lest the spell shatter. In that silence, her presence alone was enough. She was no longer simply emerging, she was enthroned. Her body, radiant and soft, glowed with warmth not of flesh, but of essence. She was not woman nor goddess alone, but longing itself, desire itself, beauty itself made flesh. To look upon her was to ache, to turn away was to starve. Every heart bent to her, not by command, but by inevitability. She was not chosen, she chose. She did not ask, she was given. The climax was not in thunder, nor in storm, nor in fire, but in stillness. The unbearable stillness of beauty too great to endure, of desire too heavy to carry. The gods trembled on their thrones. The sea moaned in its depths. The heavens blushed eternally, and all of it was hers. She had taken the cosmos into her hands without lifting a finger. She had bent gods without speaking a word. She had seduced existence itself by merely being. And as her gaze lingered, as her smile deepened, as the foam kissed her ankles with endless devotion, all creation understood. Nothing could ever resist her. Desire had not only been awakened, it had been crowned.
The sea, which only moments before had raged with tempestuous longing, now softened into calm. Waves that had crashed in fever now smoothed themselves into gentle curves, folding over one another like lovers spent after ecstasy. Foam still lingered at her ankles, but it no longer clung in desperation. It caressed her with quiet devotion, content simply to remain near. The ocean, once restless and ungovernable, had found its center, its mistress, its queen. Above, the sky too surrendered its turbulence. Where once it had burned in feverish blush, now it opened into clarity, vast and luminous. The sun steadied its gaze, no longer trembling with adoration, but radiating a warmth that crowned her in gold. Clouds, pale and serene, drifted like veils across the heavens, framing her in soft embrace. The twilight that had clung to creation melted into radiance, the half-light of expectation replaced by the certainty of dawn. Even the wind, ever fickle, quieted in her presence. It circled gently around her, not with hunger, but with reverence, carrying her fragrance across the world like an offering. Where once it had been heavy and intoxicating, now it was soft, luminous, touched with sweetness. Desire was no longer storm. It had become rhythm, order, harmony. It moved not to destroy, but to sustain. And the gods, shaken and undone, bowed to what they could no longer resist. Zeus, his thunder subdued, rose upon Olympus and beheld her. He felt the hunger still, sharp and aching, but within it now bloomed reverence. She was not a prize to be claimed, not a jewel to adorn his throne, but a goddess in her own right, radiant with dominion. He who had seized the cosmos from chaos recognized that her power was of another kind, but no less absolute. He did not crown her, for she required no crowning. He acknowledged her. Poseidon, his fury quelled, let his trident lower. The sea that had always been his to command had chosen her, and in that choice he too yielded. She was not rival, but embodiment, the very longing he had sought to master, now personified, radiant and untouchable.
He bowed not as a defeated lord, but as one who recognized in her a sovereignty that the tides themselves had affirmed. Even Hades, silent in his underworld, felt the shift. The ache remained, but it no longer gnawed at him as hunger. It became memory, echo, the shadowed half of reverence. In the dark halls, whispers of her name softened the gloom, and he too understood. Desire did not belong only to the living or the luminous. It reached even into his realm, uniting light and shadow, life and death in her dominion. Thus the three brothers, who had divided the cosmos with blade and oath, found themselves united in quiet surrender. None dared claim her, for each knew that to do so was folly. Instead, they honored her as one honors a force greater than themselves. Their rivalry dissolved not because their hunger had vanished, but because she had transformed it into worship. The world exhaled in relief. The sea steadied, the sky brightened. The earth, though still young, softened beneath her radiance. The chaos of desire, which had threatened to tear creation apart, now found itself woven into order. Not the harsh order of Kronos, nor the violent order of Zeus, but a tender, luminous balance born of longing itself. For Aphrodite did not destroy desire. She gave it shape, body, essence. She made it bearable, even as she made it irresistible. Flowers bloomed in places where no root had been planted, their colors vivid against the pale foam. They opened not by chance, but in response to her, as though the earth itself had been awakened by her steps. Birds circled above, their wings tracing hymns across the air, their cries transformed into song. Even the light shimmered differently, softer, more inviting, touched by her aura. The world, which had trembled in fear, now moved with harmony.
Aphrodite stood at the heart of this balance, not crowned, not enthroned, yet sovereign. She did not seize power, she embodied it. She did not command worship, it was offered without question. Her mere presence was enough to order the world, to calm the storms she had awakened, to soften the hunger she had stirred. And in that serenity, her true dominion became clear. For desire, left untethered, devours. It burns, it rages, it destroys. But desire embodied, desire given form, becomes something else. It becomes love, tenderness, harmony. It binds as much as it unravels. It creates as much as it consumes. In Aphrodite, the gods saw not only the sweetness of beauty, but its necessity. Without her, the world would have remained fractured, torn between chaos and control. Through her, it found rhythm. The gods gathered, silent witnesses transformed into silent worshippers. They did not kneel, not out of pride, but because kneeling was too small a gesture.
Their stillness was reverence enough, their gazes offerings more intimate than words. For in her they saw the truth of themselves, their strength undone by longing, their order softened by beauty, their immortality touched by need. And though each desired her, none spoke it aloud, for to claim her was to misunderstand her. She was not possession, she was presence. The sea sighed its contentment, the wind carried her fragrance, the sky crowned her in light, and the gods bowed in silence. In this communion the first balance was struck, not of fear and dominance, but of reverence and desire. A new order had begun, one woven not by blade or law, but by beauty, by harmony, by love. And yet beneath the serenity something more subtle stirred, not threat, but promise. For Aphrodite's presence was not the end of desire's chaos, but its transformation. Longing would always ache, beauty would always wound, passion would always burn, but through her these forces were given meaning. They became the pulse that would drive stories, the whisper that would guide choices, the fire that would both test and redeem gods and mortals alike. In her, the cosmos discovered that desire was not a force to be conquered, but the force by which all life is sustained.
She did not speak, and yet her silence was fuller than oratory. It was the silence of inevitability, the silence of truth too luminous to require words. When she finally smiled, the world felt itself remade. For it was not only a smile of beauty, it was a promise that every heart, divine or mortal, would forever be drawn into her orbit. A promise that desire, once chaotic and feared, had found its home, its guardian, its shape. The storm had passed, the fever broken, and in its place was radiance, luminous and serene. She was not only the goddess of desire, but its keeper, its compass, its shape. Through her, longing would no longer unmake, it would create. Through her, passion would no longer destroy, it would bind. Through her, beauty would no longer wound, it would heal, even as it ached. The cosmos, raw and trembling, steadied in her glow. Its scars softened, its wounds whispered into song. From chaos there had been order, from severance there had been birth, and now through her, from desire, there was balance. Aphrodite, radiant upon the sea, luminous beneath the heavens, had taken her place among the gods, not as a child, not as a captive to be drowned, but as herself, irresistible, undeniable, eternal. And the world in silence adored her.
The sea had quieted, yet its memory lingered. In the foam where she rose, one could still see the shimmer of her birth, as though the ocean never truly let her go. The waves rolled gently, each crest carrying a fragment of that moment, the surge of light, the first breath of desire, the hush that followed when the cosmos bowed. It was as if the sea itself remembered, holding her within its eternal rhythm. For though Aphrodite had stepped into the world, she never ceased belonging to the waters that bore her. Every ripple that touched a shore carried her essence. Every tide that kissed the sand was a reminder of her first caress upon creation. The world would never again be untouched, for her presence had woven itself into its very fabric. Desire had been given a body, and that body, luminous and eternal, would echo through time. The gods returned to their dominions, yet none could look upon their realms as before. Zeus carried thunder still, but beneath the roar lingered the hush of longing. Poseidon still ruled the seas, but every wave now sang her name. Even Hades, cloaked in silence, felt her pulse in the shadows, an ember that glowed against the darkness. They had not merely witnessed her, they had been altered by her. She had become a part of them, as desire is a part of all beings, immortal or mortal alike. The earth too carried her touch. Where her feet had first pressed against the foam, blossoms bloomed in defiance of time. Their petals, trembling and radiant, unfolded as though reaching for her. Mortals who came upon them generations later would gather them in reverence, not knowing why they ached at their beauty, only that they did. For in each bloom lived her echo, a reminder that longing is both wound and balm, both hunger and fulfillment. And so it became clear that Aphrodite was not bound to the hour of her birth. She was not merely a goddess of that singular dawn, nor a vision contained to one rising from the sea. She was eternal, reborn not once but endlessly. Each time a glance lingered too long, each time a hand trembled at the nearness of another, each time a heart beat faster for reasons it could not name, there she was.
In every stolen kiss, in every secret sigh, in every ache that welled up from the chest like an ocean tide, Aphrodite returned. She was not memory, but recurrence, not story, but pulse. The sea had birthed her once, yes, but humanity birthed her again and again. For love is never singular. Desire does not remain in one age, one myth, one body. It flows, it renews, it rises as foam eternal. What the gods had felt, that tremble, that surrender, was not theirs alone. Mortals too would bow beneath her power, not because she demanded it, but because she was unavoidable. Kings would burn for her, poets would sing for her, lovers would break and mend under her gaze. Armies would rise in her name, cities would crumble, and still from the ashes longing would bloom anew. Her gift was double-edged, sweet as honey and sharp as blade, but it was always undeniable. Yet there was tenderness in her dominion, a softness that the storm had concealed but the calm revealed. For though desire could wound, it could also heal. Though passion could destroy, it could also bind. Aphrodite was not chaos in flesh. She was its transformation. In her, longing became love, hunger became connection, beauty became the thread by which souls recognized one another. She was the whisper that turned strangers into lovers, the spark that bridged solitude with intimacy. She was the ache that made life bearable because it made it luminous. The sea after the storm knew this truth. Its surface, smooth as glass, reflected the heavens, not in stillness, but in gentle motion. Each ripple shimmered like memory, a reminder that the storm had not been erased, only transformed. So too did Aphrodite teach that longing was not to be feared or denied, but embraced, for in it lay both the ache of being alive and the sweetness of being seen. And so the story lingered, not as myth alone, not as a tale confined to the mouths of poets or priests, but as something more intimate, more enduring. For each time a mortal stood at the edge of the sea and felt their chest swell with unnameable yearning, they touched the same truth the gods once knew. Each time love unfurled sudden and overwhelming, each time passion struck like lightning or flowed like tide, Aphrodite was born anew.
Her birth was not event but rhythm, not history but heartbeat. The ocean had given her form, but humanity gave her immortality. In the glance that lingers, in the desire that refuses silence, in the embrace that turns two bodies into one flame, she rises. In the quiet ache of solitude, in the trembling hand that reaches for another, in the tear shed for beauty too great to hold, there she is, radiant, eternal. The poets would name her, the sculptures would shape her, the lovers would call to her in sighs. Yet none of these could contain her, for she was not theirs to hold. She belonged to the world, to every soul that ever longed, to every heart that ever broke and healed again. The gods had seen her first, yes, but the mortals would keep her forever. And perhaps this is the truth worth whispering at the end of her tale, that Aphrodite was not born only once upon the sea. Her rising did not end with the foam, nor with the first bloom of flowers at her feet. She rises still. She rises whenever beauty wounds us into awe. She rises whenever longing pulls us beyond ourselves. She rises whenever love, sudden and overwhelming, remakes us. Close your eyes and you will feel it, the tide within you, the ache, the sweetness, the unbearable lightness of wanting. That is her. She has never left, she has never ceased. She is born each time you love, each time you desire, each time you surrender to the flame that is both peril and salvation. Aphrodite, luminous and eternal, walks still among the waves, but she also walks within the chambers of your heart. She is foam, she is flower, she is gaze and kiss, ache and song. She is the storm and the calm, the wound and the balm. And as long as hearts tremble, as long as desire burns, as long as love remakes the world, she will rise again.